So, my lovely home country, South Africa, is experiencing quite a downturn in terms of the economic activity. And the main thing is that it's the topical issue that has been the exiting of the multinationals here in South Africa, and especially that it's amounted to mass job losses. Now, just a few days ago, just under a week ago, there was the whole thing about a shutdown that was supposed to happen on the 4th of September. They wanted it all round, but it was actually isolated to the industrial area in Pretoria called Roslyn, where certain people of the community just took to the streets and went from door to door in terms of the companies issuing mandates saying that, hey, you guys are hiring foreigners and you are not hiring us. And some people brought their CVs and their qualifications there, and quite frankly, it's a matter of, well, look, as far as private companies, they can hire whoever they want. Now, what you want in a robust sort of economy and a job creating sort of economy is the fact that if opportunity is not present over here, then there's another one next door, meaning that no one is actually entitled to a job in that sense. So you actually think that this is a matter of best fit. Now, you can look at it from a number of coins, and especially a number of sides on the same coins, or the point of view that usually it is only two sides. But effectively, you would think that, well, certain multinationals, and then when you're looking at the crony capitalism, they would want a sort of an economy where they can control the amount of, let's perhaps say, that salary demands and all that stuff. And of course, things like a minimum wage and all that are out the way. And if an economy is pretty much left leaning, and let's say in terms of the policies, and the policies pretty much mandate that there is a minimum wage, then you find that it makes it a little bit more expensive, especially for small employers. And unfortunately, one of the things that we have here in South Africa now, effectively, and I know people do feel that, yes, there is something called exploitation and all that sort, but, effectively what you want is that a person can decide that, hang on, if I go work here and there's a certain opportunity, I can leave this one, and that's my legal right. And of course, what's bearing on my conscience is that I can go and do that extra amount of job because it pays me double the amount elsewhere. And there are those who pretty much, as far as if you look at the fact that mainly these people who are crony capitalists, meaning that they depend on the government to usher in and control factors within a particular country or national economy to allow them to scale, meaning that they're not actually getting by on their entrepreneurial flair or their ability to create value in terms of products and services. They actually are depending on legislation to make it conducive for them for business operations. And they would want a situation where, as far as there's a ceiling in terms of how much they pay a person, or they don't have to get too much of a competitive bidding. So this has led to a melting point. That's the word I was looking for, of a plethora of issues just hitting an economy. And unfortunately, it means that the economy in South Africa has just stagnated and declined as a result. Whereas it used to be an economy that was creating products, and there were a lot of people just having jobs. And effectively, it meant that, if an opportunity was not present for you this month, you could pretty much market yourself, and then by next month you're pretty much gone, and you don't exactly have to have this long lead time between not looking for opportunities and not getting opportunities. But one thing, and people must always just remember, is that there is that third seal in the book of Revelation, and that third seal intends is economic famine. So you're not just seeing it here in South Africa, you're seeing it all around the world. The people are just complaining, and the main thing is the fact that, I'm not saying it's not an issue in South Africa, but I've heard it in particular so-called first world countries where they're saying groceries are just completely unaffordable. And people are complaining about that. And that is the chief amongst things. Of course, people will say, well, look, rent is going up and certain things are going up. And especially when you look at cities, in particular in Australia, for example, I think that's the second most expensive housing market in all the whole world. First, beyond that, is actually Hong Kong. And, that in those kind of cities and all that sort of stuff and high rise, you do get that in South Africa. But that in South Africa, it's only in one place. That's chiefly Cape Town, where people are complaining about rentals. Because if you look at the kind of governance that is there in Cape Town, is the DA, which is the Democratic Alliance, which is pretty much akin to the Labour government and the Labour Party that is in Australia, and also the Labour Party in the UK, in the United Kingdom. That's another place with very high rentals. So you can see that this high-rise sort of attraction, and meaning that people are not exactly building houses, but they're trying to attract people, I don't know, to the cities or anything. And in Cape Town, to be honest with you, and a lot of people must just say that understand one thing about Cape Town is the economy there is pretty much premised upon tourism. That's the main thing. And, I'm not saying that there's no investment and there's no growth and there's no sort of economic activity or I should say economic diversification in terms of the type of industries that are just developing over there. It's just a matter of people are just flocking there because it's a beautiful city and there's this big mountain over there which God created, and it's just as a natural vegetation. And the Democratic Alliance and of course some are now in bed with the ANC in the whole GNU setup. And to be quite frank with you, and the Holy Spirit even conveyed it, is as that the ANC has just turned white in terms of being in cahoots and being in bed with the Democratic Alliance. And for that reason, they're going to fall just a whole systematically, as in this government of national unity, being no matter what party it is, if they've gone into this government of national unity, they're in bed with the ANC, whatever it is, and there's a whole lot of political capture in that, there will be that demise that is going to happen to all of them, meaning that this system of career politics is just going to go by the wayside and just going to completely collapse here in South Africa. Now, there was something, and it's taken me a long time to get to this, as far as I'm just giving the variety of factors that are happening, and I'm not even naming everything. It's just that, in South Africa, one must just understand that it's quite a complex economy. It's not as straightforward as what people will always try to paint it out to be, in the sense that we've got a lot of things that are going on over here. And just to keep it as simple as possible, that when this multinationals actually come into the country, a lot of the times it's a mandate that is either like, okay, people will look at the triple BEE and all those economic policies that the ANC have put in, but if you've noticed that they're essentially not going anywhere, and there are parties there within the, as far as the government of national unity, because the ANC is not exactly in the majority. They're not a majority ruling party, meaning that they don't have anywhere near 51%. It's more resembling what's happening in Europe, where it's like, well, there's a whole lot of coalitions that are actually ruling and actually taking over, and that's exactly what's happening right now with this current crop of governance that we're kind of having. And as you can see, it's actually just so ineffective, and a lot of people are just getting very, very impatient. And not because God has shown me anything about what's actually going to happen in 2026, but I do have it that under knowledge of the fact that there is somebody who I mentioned quite a lot who actually hears from God, and from what he had seen, he he pretty much doubts that there's going to be an election, and the election being that the local government municipal elections, because if you're already noticing that people are so impatient, people have had enough, and there are so many things, and especially that was just going on here in South Africa, that are saying that Cyril Ramaphosa must just step down, and meaning that people are coming for these politicians at this point, especially for a plethora of issues like service delivery being chief amongst those. So that is something that is currently happening as a melting point over here in South Africa. And the one issue, and I just wanted to make mention that you're seeing, because of the fact that there's so much joblessness, and this is an economy that is bleeding and hemorrhaging jobs at this moment, that the pinnacle of this is when you hear that Massmart is going to leave the market, meaning that Walmart owned, because in South Africa it is called Massmart, and they are the game stores, Macro, and I forgot what the hardware is anyway, and they have a hardware chain which just sort of evaded my my brain for a little while. But anyway, they are going to be exiting the market and just selling off properties. Now, what is the main thing that one must just be careful of is that the way the Holy Spirit had given it to me is that that's when the mass job losses are going to be hitting the actual pinnacle, or the height of it is going to happen then. So they're still going to be bleeding more jobs until the point where we hear that Walmart or Massmart is leaving this market. And with that said, when that happens, this is not to say that it's all doom and gloom. The department store model that you see that is with Massmart or Walmart in South Africa is currently operating with will be pretty much rendered dead. There will be another American retailer that's going to come in. I do know the name. I'm just not going to name it right now. But you'll know exactly when that time comes. And all they're going to do is come in and just going to replace it with smaller grocery stores. So that is something that's going to happen, where they're going to be taking over the properties on this side. And during that time, we will see things starting to sort of maybe just, I don't know if it's a matter of economic recovery at that point. I don't know too much about that. But the only other facet I was shown about the retail sector is particularly that you see, and I've already mentioned about Checkers actually growing, and they're becoming getting into the whole buy bulk and save sort of value sort of grocery department, and that's something that they've taken over, and we've already seen that transaction. I've given that update, and now it seems like it's years ago when the Holy Spirit given me. It's one of those things that was in sort of partial, I should say, it was a partial fulfillment. I can't even remember too much. I must actually remind myself as to go back to what the rest of that will be. But effectively, Checkers will be something that the Checkers Group, or the, as we also know, that they also own the other store called ShopRite. So the ShopRite store is something else that's also going to start diversifying, because that's also under the Checkers Group, like I just mentioned. And it'll be quite an interesting facet, and especially what it means in terms of commercial property, because that's the other aspect, that the retail, remember, as a brick and mortar setup, also works in conjunction with the malls and the shopping districts, the shopping malls, and all sorts of things. And particularly that I mentioned Massmart in this particular context, that Massmart, usually when the macro stores actually operate on their own sort of private property. So that is the one that is going to be taken over by the other American retailer when they come in, because the one chain of stores which I mentioned is Game, unfortunately, they actually operate within the malls, and I've already made mention that, this commercial property is going to start suffering, and we're already hearing rumors of certain malls and certain things going bankrupt here in South Africa, just as an example. So as you see, I'm covering so much base and covering so many things at especially one time. And there's one thing I just did not make mention of is the Trump tariffs, and Donald Trump himself saying that, listen, he's not coming to South Africa for the G20 meeting. He actually, the vice president is going to be coming by, which is JP Vance. So JD Vance, as to say, beg your pardon, JD Vance. So that'll be his actual replacement in that sort of thing, and he will be delegated to be taking over and representing the USA in that whole big G20 meeting. But, Cyril Ramaphosa, as we have noticed, has said a lot of things. And in one of the main things that he fumbled was the saying that, he didn't realize Johannesburg is in such a bad state, but here we are hosting the G20 summit, which is quite horrendous. But, of course, there's a lack of investment and lack of interest, and of course, they're stealing everything. But essentially, people, don't let it fool you. That's exactly what the global elitists want, and this, as far as that's concerned. So this is going on, and the main thing is that I think what's reading under the table, and I'm just saying that what's actually not going to be said, is that the handle of the South Africa, meaning that there's going to be the civil disobedience, and they're already picking this up. So the necessity of this meeting is to make sure that they keep their interest here in South Africa, because who do I represent? God. And God is saying, no, he's not allowing the nation to go a certain way. He is going to allow this whole thing to just completely fumble, and meaning that South Africa is going to be on the desolate side, just so to speak. And from there, she will start being rebuilt. So that is what God's hand in all of this is. And of course, the Trump tariffs and everything that's happening is just a factor in all that's going on. Now, people have been talking, and I've been hearing a lot of things that they were like saying, well, no, it seems like Donald Trump is in with the elite and he's been captured and everything. And I'm like, well, look, and I've said it here ad nauseum that Donald Trump, if anything, the only reason that they're working with him and now looking like to come in the fore and actually being peaceable with him is the fact that they've tried to keep him out. So now on the surface and everything, it looks like it's all peace and everything. And you'll see that in times to come that, it will be a situation where it'll go back to the fact that they just won't be able to control him. Because we've already seen it with Mr. Elon Musk, who has already said that, he jumped on the whole MAGA campaign, and already he didn't get what he wanted. And then you started seeing the whole toys being thrown out the cots and all that stuff. And of course, the diva tactics and all that started coming out at that point. But it's going to ramp up. And if you remember when I specifically said that they're going to get a clone, meaning somebody else to come in and acting as Donald Trump, because the real one will disappear. That's right. So the Holy Spirit even gave it to me that the indication that you'll see that is that the divorce rumors are going to start coming, meaning that this imposter will come in and then divorce his wife just to have a philandering sort of affair, so to speak. And that's the way that's going to be justified. And if you remember what I always communicated, that God utilizes people despite their imperfections. And one thing is this, and one thing one should lament, is that Donald Trump, in whatever you think about him, has never needed to divorce his wives for him to have an affair. Why this time would it necessitate him having to leave his wife in order to carry out an affair? Quite simple. His wife will be able to tell that this is not her husband. Call it a woman's intuition, whatever. But effectively, people are going to be fooled, and only if you have the spirit of discernment, you'll be able to see that this is not actually Donald Trump. So people are already speaking about things like, there's this Donald Trump pull this, and he's in with the deep state and all that. No, that's confusion tactics. They've tried to take him out. People saw that there was a bullet. Now already people are coming up, and this is the problem I have with conspiracy theorists and everything, is that they come up with a whole lot of things, and then they want to say that, let's lump it into this, and it creates more confusion than anything. Because at the end of the day, if you want to create a good conspiracy theory or a compelling argument, bring the evidence. I mean, they're saying that, for example, that the attempts on his life was nothing but just, social programming and all sorts of things, and we're just getting hoodwinked and being trumped. And what's actually funny is that it's coming from people who say that they're Christians, and I'm saying, well, look, at the end of the day, if you are saying that you are carrying on for the gospel and God is actually being the one that's giving you certain things and certain revelation and all that, then why is it that you have to come up with weird sort of tactics just to go and prove your point? So I'm picking that up, that it's also coming from these so-called, like I was saying, these Christian conservatives, and they're also kind of saying certain weird things, and I'm like looking back and I'm thinking to myself, come on, people, come on, like, all right, if you want to criticize a person, especially if that you feel like they're going too deep in with this one world agenda, which I've already discussed on over here, understand that as far as biblical prophecy, when God has his elect, and know that there's only so much that they can do, because Satan has to have his moment under the sun. And Satan is the ruler of this world. So there's only so much a human being can do. I'm just saying, I mean, even Donald Trump, I'm not defending him in anything. He's no angel, but, people are also coming up all sorts of theories that, hey, no, he was always in on the agenda. And I'm like, well, you can say that, and he was a friend of the world, and that's okay. And I do understand that. But also, he learned how to play the game, and everybody loved him when he learned how to play the game, and he was pretty much seemingly on their side, only for him to come out and say, no, hang on, no, you guys are messing up. And when they couldn't control him, they all turned on him. I mean, people are saying, oh, this Epstein thing, that sort of thing, and the Epstein files, okay, whatever. They could have hit him with that a long time ago if it really was anything to do with that. But anyway, I just find the timing of that just weird. I'm not going deep into that. But the other thing that they're also now stating is the advancement of like technology companies, and now this pushing of AI and everything, which, as you know, I also have my reservations on all of that. And of course, look, at the end of the day, Silicon Valley and the United States, and as far as technological improvements and advancements and all that, is a big part of the economy. This is not something one can get away with too much. And if you remember what the Holy Spirit conveyed to me, that the main thing is this, is that Donald Trump has been given the wisdom in order to actually get power back their economy, meaning that there's still jobs and all that stuff, despite the fact that, listen, that the agenda is still going to be carried out. And remember that chiefly behind the agenda is the fact that there is still the Antichrist, or the false Messiah, as in the Antios Christos in this instance, who actually still pretty much resides in the hallways of the White House, despite the fact that Donald Trump is occupying office. And that is quite a dangerous thing. And if you remember the whole thing about Donald Trump saying, guess who is spying on my campaign? Barack Obama. So understand something, that there's a lot of things that are just happening at this moment. And of course, Satan, as being the author of confusion, will obviously obfuscate certain things and certain points. And this is why people need to be on high alert and just be aware that, at the end of the day, the only person that can actually keep Satan confined is God himself. And hence why I'm actually going to discuss my main segment of the show, and I'm just going to leave this update over here because it seems like it's gone all over the place. But effectively, I had to sort of just give a background exactly as to why this whole USA and South Africa thing, bilateral sort of relation, is just going all over the place, and how it's actually quite a complex nature. And before I get to the main segment of the show, is that I actually touched on Cyril Ramaphosa, who actually congratulated the Zimbabwean government on handling the land affairs and actually expropriating sort of land from previous white owners and everything. And if you recall that just recently, I did release an actual prophecy, which was relating to how the white Zimbabweans are going to be flocking to not only just, I think it was chiefly South Africa that what I saw, but a lot of them are just going to be exiting Zimbabwe. And if you remember that even preceding that one, there was something about Zimbabwe having its fate. Now, a fateful outcome, as opposed to a destined outcome, means that pretty much usually it's God's judgment upon something. And I don't know how Zimbabwe is going to look as a republic anymore. Particularly that I was saying that, this is about God moving who belongs to him. So this white exodus, of the exodus of white people, was also going to be synonymous with the capital flight, meaning that there's going to be these companies exiting Zimbabwe as well. And that is just a sign as the externalities as to the white people. I'm not saying that there's going to be not other black people from Zimbabweans or black Zimbabweans or anything, or any other race, not having to leave Zimbabwe as a situation. But there is something that he's doing. He hasn't quite said to me as yet. And he hasn't shown me anything. But if he does, I'll come back and I'll say. But the one thing he said is that he's going to cut off the dependence of Zimbabwe from South Africa, meaning that it was actually the enablement by the ANC government towards the ZANU-PF government in Zimbabwe. So this whole thing, favor and all that, it's going to come to an end. So, Cyril is just saying things for whatever reason. But effectively, it's just a matter of just showing that how Cyril's flip-flopping. One day he's pro-capitalist and he's so about, sort of strengthening economic ties, and then the next minute he's all on this left-wing opposition thing. So he's all over the place. And the main thing is to just understand that his main thing here is just to clamp down on this corruption that he's actually lost of. And we saw shame that there was this the lawyer, that Van Niekerk lawyer, who was the actual insolvency, and he was an insolvency lawyer, actually pretty much investigating a Ponzi scheme, and he received a death threat about a few days before then, and somebody booked an appointment and he was killed subsequently to that. And then there was the other lawyers, which was actually Cluta Murray and his son. I think his son was Thomas Murray, and Cluta Murray was shot on the highway, and they were investigating some sort of fraud, and especially a certain liquidation, because they were liquidators, so to speak. And at that point, it was also the same thing. So people who are actually checking out this corruption in South Africa, is that you can see that people are quite panicked, because Cyril Ramaphosa has pretty much laid down the gauntlet as far as ensuring that people are going to go down for state capture. And what you're seeing is people are just ensuring that the certain things are not reaching trials, and Cyril Ramaphosa isn't doing enough, so to speak, as far as having to do it in a speedily manner. But effectively, the evidence, I will say, is there. He's sitting on top of it and he's doing nothing. So another reason why we are having a loss of investor confidence at this particular moment in time, and God is allowing it for a reason, but it's just to show that how God's hand is always in control in this situation. And if you recall again that once you see that this whole Eskom start saying that there's no more load shedding and everything, and the whole this propaganda that they're coming up with, that it will effectively hit a point where they'll be losing so much control that they can't keep the lights on, and Cyril just will have to speed up what he's already started, because this commission that he set up is already sort of has missed its deadline. And but I tell you one thing, and I guarantee you that it doesn't need an extra commission. The evidence is there. He's literally, and I'm talking, I've seen it in the spirit. I've seen it. I know for a fact, personally, he's been sitting on the files, and he pretty much just needs to pull them out. But he's waiting for that opportunity or that opportune time, just to ensure that he can get the former president arrested before he does anything else. Anyway, that's one I just had to do and just repeat again. Thank you for tuning in. I'll get to the main segment of the show.